The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm honoured to rise today during this very important emergency debate and lend my thoughts and some feedback from the community today. The very serious revelations by the RCMP last Monday should be taken with exactly that, as utmost seriousness. The RCMP has alleged that Indian diplomats and consular officials based in Canada were participating in foreign interference in Canada. And to most Canadians, this might come as a shock to them that this could be happening in Canada. But I will say that within the Sikh community, this is something that they've known about and were vindicated by what the RCMP had alleged just last week, and something that they've been talking about over the last 40 years. This is something that is very close to the Sikh community's heart. And as was mentioned by our Deputy Leader, the MP from Millwoods, over those 40 years, there's a big difference in what has happened. Before, there was a time when they would take away your Indian visa would get cancelled. And now the difference is that people's lives are being taken. There is coercion being done. There are threats of violence and extortions that are happening. There's a big difference in what happened over those 40 years. And just to lay out some of the seriousness of those allegations, I wanted to just read into the record some of the evidence that they brought forward. The RCMP has obtained evidence that demonstrates 4 very serious issues. The first, violent extremists impacting both countries, India and Canada. Number 2, links tying agents of the government of India to homicides and violent acts. Number 3, the use of organized crime to create perception of unsafe environment targeting the South Asian community in Canada. And number 4, interference in democratic processes. These are by far some very serious allegations that should not be taken lightly at all for any Canadians. Canadians should feel safe in Canada. Full stop. Their families should feel safe. Our communities should feel safe. Canadians should be safe from extortions, from murder, and from threats of violence. But after 9 years of this government, Canadians do not feel safe anymore. Canada has become a safe haven and a playground for foreign interference under this Liberal-NDP government after 9 years. We saw just last year a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil. And the RCMP has alleged that that was done by a foreign government, in that case, by India. It's a very difficult time in Canada right now. Many don't feel safe. Many don't feel like this is Canada anymore. Whether you were born here and grew up your whole life, or you immigrated here like my family and millions of others, the one common thing that we hear across the country is Canada is not Canada anymore. Many people left the countries they were from because it was unsafe there, only to come to Canada and have the same feeling that Canadians are not safe on Canadian soil anymore. And as I spoke about the Sikh community who have been advocating for this, as I said, it's a stark difference about what the change has taken place in Canada for many diaspora communities. We must realize one thing, that a criminal in Canada is a criminal. A Canadian is a Canadian. This is not a religious or a cultural fight. This is for the safety and sovereignty of Canadians. The security of Canadians is at risk after 9 years of this Liberal-NDP government. As I've said many times, people just do not feel safe here anymore. They don't feel safe, and there is no safety for their children. Extortions are up. Violent crime is up. All of these things have been happening because of soft on crime policies. That is the reality of living in Canada today. That's why so many people do not feel safe here anymore. Last year, the the government of America, the U.S. government, they foiled a plot of an assassination. They went from doing an allegation to an arrest within 1 week, within 1 week of those allegations. In contrast, here in Canada, the Prime Minister made allegations and then it just went quiet. Canadians felt more unsafe after they heard that news because they saw that there was no action being taken. And that is the problem. There has been no action taken by this government for some of the serious crimes that are taking place in this country. In fact, it has become a playground for these type of activities to take place because it doesn't seem like there's serious leadership in this country anymore after 9 years of this Prime Minister. The communities at large started feeling unsafe at that point. They felt like there's no law to protect them anymore and that you had to fend for yourself. That is the reality after 9 years. That is what diasporal communities are feeling today. Canada is at a very critical point right now in stopping foreign interference. This should be a wake-up call to this government that's soft on crime. Canadians need to feel safe in Canada from threats of violence, coercion, from extortion that are being done by foreign actors. Canadians deserve to be protected on Canadian soil. As our leader had mentioned, the news and the allegations that were released that last week regarding India's interference in Canada are extremely concerning and must be taken very seriously. We are in an environment where this government has divided Canadians and pitted Canadians against each other. Canada is supposed to be a country with freedom of expression, including religion and political views. And what this foreign interference has uncovered is that this government is incompetent and unable to protect Canadians from threats. Conservatives expect the full criminal prosecution of anyone and everyone who has threatened, murdered, or otherwise harmed Canadians. And my Conservative colleagues and I have the goal of getting answers for Canadians, to keep Canadians safe and stop Canada from being a playground for foreign interference. And I'll end off by quoting our leaders from the letter that he recently wrote. He wrote, "Any foreign interference from any country, including India, is unacceptable and must be stopped." Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
The member opposite said that his leader, the leader of the Conservative Party, in relation to this particular very serious allegations by the RCMP, stated that the Prime Minister is pitting Canadian versus Canadian. I'd like to know which Canadian he is saying is pitting which Canadian in regards to the homicide of and transnational aggression of against Sikh Canadians here in Canada.
Honourable Member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Madam Speaker, it's well known what this Prime Minister does. He pits Canadians against each other to distract and divide away from his poor failed record. And in this case, it's his poor record on foreign interference. He was recently at the Foreign Interference Inquiry, where he went and distracted to pit Canadians against each other once again and made all sorts of misleading statements in there. And that's what I'm talking about. He does this on purpose, just to distract away from his failed, miserable record that's left Canadians feeling more unsafe than ever before.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Skeena-Buckley Valley.
Madam Speaker, the member highlighted the need to keep Canadians safe from foreign interference, and yet there is confidential information that would allow the leader of his party to ensure that people in his party and other Canadians are more safe, and yet the leader of the Conservative Party refuses to get the security clearance necessary to see that information. This is a case of willful blindness when the lives of Canadians are on the line. And I would like the member to explain to Canadians who are wondering why every other political leader of every party in this place has received the necessary clearance to see those documents, and his leader refuses to. Why?
For Calgary Forest Lawn.
Madam Speaker, it's clear to see the NDP once again wants to prop up the Liberals in gagging the Conservative leader. That's exactly what they want our leader to do. They want him to take a confidential briefing, in his own words, that would have to remain confidential. And let me be crystal clear on this point so that it gets through their heads. According to the CSIS Act, the Prime Minister, in this case, can walk over, he can take 10 steps this way, walk over to the Conservative leader, and if this is all about the names, he can release the names to the leader today. The leader doesn't need to be gagged and put under a gagging order so that he's not able to do anything with the information like the rest of these leaders. Release the names.
The honourable member for Saanich Gulflands.
Yeah, to my honourable friend from Calgary Forest Lawn, it's very important to not only get a security briefing, but to understand the nature of the obligations of Canada, our intelligence gathering and security experts, and the relationship they must have with our Five Eyes partners. And as much as I believe he sincerely thinks this would be an easy thing to do, release names, to do so might jeopardize what are referred to, they're human beings, but they've been referred to by CSIS and explaining it to me as intelligence assets whose lives could be at risk if we were to be reckless. I want to put to the honourable member that there was a more dangerous time in 1985, the biggest single terrorist attack on Canadian soil with the Air India bombing. I would no more decide to politicize that and say that somehow the Prime Minister of the day, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney, was responsible for that. I think we know from the Air India inquiry that there were systemic problems. The RCMP had bits of information. CSIS had bits of information. They didn't work together well. It's critical that in a debate like this on an emergency motion of threats to Canadians on Canadian soil from a foreign government, we stop trying to politicize it and blame one party or one party's leader, but work together to show foreign governments that we can work together. And on that basis, I want the official opposition leader to get his security briefing.
For Calgary Forest Lawn.
Well, Madam Speaker, our leader did get a briefing. In fact, on October 14th, 2024, the National Security Intelligence Advisor to the Prime Minister, the Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs at Global Affairs Canada, and the Director of CSIS all gave him a briefing about the foreign interference that was happening from India. The CSIS Act allows the government to offer information to any Canadian about specific risks of foreign interference without forcing them into sworn secrecy or controlling what they say. And after receiving that briefing, they never brought up anything once about not even just our party or anyone of the false claims supposedly that the Prime Minister was making. This is nothing but to try to gag the Conservative leader. This is such a serious issue of foreign interference, and as you can see, the Greens, the Liberals, and the NDP are all playing politics.
The honourable member for Stevenson, Richmond East.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to continue on the same line of questioning here. And I have a statement here from Richard Fadden, who served as the former CSIS director. And he said, I really think the leader of the opposition should accept a security clearance so that he can be briefed in detail. All of these other politicians seem to be able to function and fulfill their duties as members of the opposition while still having some measure of briefing. But at this point in time, and this is the most important thing here, the last thing we need to send to India is a message that we are not united on this point, because they will take advantage of that point and they'll use it in India. And they have. We've seen a former army official who's state media now in India, serving as a state media commentator, and said that India should spend $100 million to take down the Prime Minister of Canada. So why is that happening now when we're not united on this? And you're talking about not being political.
Calgary Forest Lawn.
Madam Speaker, the only thing that we're not united on is wanting our Conservative leader to be gagged after being sworn in. And in fact, it's the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff who admitted that's exactly what happens. I'll quote her. According to the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, this would prevent a recipient from using the information in any manner. And even where that is not the case, briefing political parties on sensitive intelligence regarding an MP could put the leader or representative of a political party in a tough position, because any decision affecting the MP might have to be made without giving them due process. So it's not just taking our word for it, it's the Prime Minister's own Chief of Staff that admits it's a gag order. And that's something that we don't want to do.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Edmonton Millwoods. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I just wanted to ask my colleague that why does he believe that we are dealing with a very serious issue here, issue of the RCMP saying that agents of the Indian government have been involved in murders and organized crime in Canada, serious violence towards Canadians. This Liberal government and this Prime Minister have been in government now for 9 years. Foreign interference from a number of countries, including India, has increased during that time. Violence in this country has increased during that time. There are serious gaps left where there are serious gaps in where is allowing Canadians to be less safe in this country now. And yet, when you hear from NDP and you hear from the Liberals, all they can talk about is the opposition leader. Why?
Honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
I want to thank our Deputy Leader for his great work on trying to tackle extortion in Canada, but he's absolutely right. This is all politics for the Liberals, for the NDP, and obviously the Greens. That's all this is. This is such a serious issue that's taking place in Canada that they know is happening, but it's more important for them to play politics. And I want to actually thank the member of Edmonton Millwoods for bringing forward an extortion bill that I must remind everyone that the Liberals and the NDP voted against. This member from Edmonton Millwoods brought forward an extortion bill because of the feedback we heard from the communities not feeling safe after 9 years of this Liberal NDP government. So he brought forward a private member's bill that would strengthen the laws when it comes to extortion, especially for organized crime, which we're seeing run rampant under 9 years of this incompetent Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers. And what did they do? When we brought forward that common sense conservative bill on extortion, they voted against it. It's more proof that everything is politics to them, and this isn't about the safety or sovereignty or security of Canadians.